the leaves are turning to rust. Birds flying south for the winter. Winds are beginning to gust. Now is the right time for turning. I stands where rivers once churned. Now is the right time for turning. Now it is my time to turn. Now it is my time to turn.
How good and how sweet it is to be at Congregation Beit Simchat Torah on Simchat Torah. We're so glad that you joined us this evening, coming to you live from our 30th Street Sanctuary, and we are simply delighted that Ilana Arian, the composer of that beautiful Hine Matov, which is beloved at CBST, Ivan Birenbaum, Barbara Friedman, all under the direction of our brilliant Joyce Rosenzweig, are with us tonight to bring us a freiliche, a beautiful, a very gay Simchat Torah. I am so glad to lead services live and in person with our cantorial intern, Sam Rosen, with our illustrious senior rabbi, Rabbi Sharon Kleinbaum. And together we welcome in Simchat Torah, having spent miraculously on the Jewish calendar almost 9 full days in holiday mode. And so we start out with kindling the lights for this Yom Tov evening. All through tonight we will be coming from the CBST Sidor Bechol Levavcha, the blue cover, if you've got it at home. For one single section for our Hakafot, we're also using Sidor Kol HaNeshama from the Reconstructionist movement. We are a community that takes the people of the book very seriously, and we have a full bookshelf for services tonight. So if you will join us on page 39, and if you are lighting lights on this Yom Tov evening, please, now's the time, and we can all sing together in the candle blessings, and then our Shehecheyanu for sacred and once-in-a-lifetime occasions.
אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו להדליק נר, להדליק נר של יום טוב. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה.
We do not take for granted that we have been sustained up until this moment when we could all gather together to celebrate and to be in each other's good company, to dance, to sing, to learn, to honor, and to share. On page 78, our Mariv service begins with the Baruch Hu, and we tune our ears to the key of the season in this Shalosh Regalim Nusach, this special chanting which is only used for the 3 pilgrimage holidays, of which Sukkot, leading into our Yom Tov this evening, is one. So rise in body and in spirit, page 78.
Baruchu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach leolam va'ed.
Be seated if you were standing, and together we turn to page 80 for a blessing as evening falls. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bidbaro ma'ari v'aravi.
ומעביר יום ומביא לילה ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה. אדוני צבאות שמו אל חי וקיים תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני המריב ערבים
Page 86 for Ahavat Olam, a love letter between God and the Jewish people, signed with Torah.
אהבת עולם, בית ישראל עמך אהבת. אהבת עולם, בית ישראל עמך אהבת. תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת. אהבת עולם, בית ישראל עמך אהבת. תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת. אהבת עולם, בית ישראל עמך אהבת. 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 תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת. תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת. ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך.
Please continue at your own pace through page 92.
אדוני אלוהיכם אמת,
Please join me on page 93 of your CBST Siddur, Bechol Levavcha, in this beautiful poem by Rabbi Reuben Zalman. I know a vast sea between shore and shore, dividing mortar from the vine. The slave sings her freedom on her far bank, legions of Pharaoh drowned within. But another sea I know, dividing men from women, self from home or self from self, creation from ineffability. One side perhaps not entirely narrow, the other not fully yours or not promised. Amidst the drowned multitudes, the sea has her inhabitants, gazing green and salt to dry and assured land, surrounding a flashing brow uplifted. Who ordains the impassable? One may cross equally, stretch out an arm. The journey toward self reveals it, this to the redeemed long known. None may hinder the way that God has parted. Together we sing the Song of the Sea, Mi Chamocha, Shirat Hayam, on page 94.
Who is like you, Adonai? Who is like you, Adonai et Yaakov uve'alo miyad chazak mimenu Baruch atah Adonai Baruch Shemo Ga'al Yisrael.
We pray for protection. Hashkivenu Adonai. Page 98. And we set these words to a beautiful poem by Chaim Stern, the music composed and well loved at CBST by Dan Singer and Noah Aronson.
Understanding among us, let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Let there be love and understanding shelter from השכיבנו, אדוני אלוהינו, השכיבנו לשלום, השכיבנו, אדוני אלוהינו, השכיבנו
Only just now emerging from a week in living in our Sukkot, in being so close in experience in these fragile, temporary structures, one of the first things we do is we pray for rain. It seems almost beshert, like it was written in the stars as we were reciting Tefillat Geshem this morning, that all across New York City and as we were seeing all across the world, the lightning cracked, the thunder roared, and it reminded us that there can be too much of a good thing. We pray for rain, but what is the tenuous and almost invisible difference between rain and storm? It's the protections that we put up for ourselves, for those we love, for the communities of which we are part, to weather the storm. It is the way that we extend ourselves out into the world, that we can be a Sukkat Shalom, we can be a shelter of peace for those who face life's storms. And so we pray for love and understanding and Shalom.
Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storm. ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך, ברוך אתה אדוני, הפורס סוכת שלום, עלינו, עלינו, ועל כל עמו ישראל, ועל כל העמים, ועל ירושלים. אמן.
We rise in body and spirit on page 102. Moshe proclaimed the festivals of the Eternal to the people Israel.
וידבר משה את מועדי אדוני אל בני ישראל.
Following the Chatzi Kaddish, you can find the Matbea Tefillah, the blessings for the Amidah on this festival evening, on page 266 of your CBST Siddur, all the way through page 275. We'll make sure that you have all of the appropriate Yom Tov insertions. And as we begin our Amidah, we are so delighted that we can share a video of Larry Kay, who will be leading us in a special Germanic, Jewish, Ashkenazi tradition of the Yaris Kaddish. I look forward to this every year. See how many of the different nusach, the different sounds of our sacred text you can pick up from within this one blessing. It will take us through the entire calendar year through Jewish music. So we remain standing if we are able, and following the Yaris Kaddish, we will have an opportunity for the prayers of our hearts or the prayers on the page.
Yikadal Yikadash Shemei Rabbah Amen. Be'alma divera v'chirute v'yamlich malchute. Chayechon u'yomechon u'chaye dechol ve'Yisrael ba'agala u'vizman kariv ve'imeru Amen. Yesh me Rabba mevarach le'alam le'al me'almaya yitbarach. Yitarach ve'yishtabach ve'yitpar ve'yitromam ve'yitnaseh ve'yitadar ve'yitaleh ve'yirah shemei dekudesha barichu Min kol birchata v'shirata Tushvihata v'nechemata Tamiran v'yama Ve'imru amen. Ve'imru amen. Ve'imru amen. Ve'imru amen.
It is a tree of life. Torah has sustained us, has nourished us, has been our blueprint, our map, our comfort, our companion.
מחזיקים בה ותומכיה וכל נתיבותיה השיבנו אליך חדש ימינו שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו
Together as a community, we turn our thoughts and our attention and our prayers to those in need of healing. Please join me on page 130 and 131 of the CBST Siddur. And please share in the chat, if it is in accordance with your Chag custom, the names of those for whom you pray for healing of mind, body, and spirit. Mishaberach imotenu Sarah, Rivka, Leah, Rachel, Bilha, V'Zilpa, V'avotenu Avraham, Yitzchak, V'Yaakov, Hu Yivarech v'Yirapeh et HaCholim. May the one who blessed our ancestors, Sarah, Rivka, Leah, Rachel, Bilha, and Zilpah, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, bless us too. Bless and heal all who are ill, all who we name tonight, and all whom we hold in our hearts. May God, who granted blessings to our ancestors and healed them of their pain, also remember us today and visit us with your blessings. May you give comfort and strength to all of us who are ill and help us to be well again. Remember those of us whose bodies need comfort and strength, healing and renewal. Remember, too, those of us who are faint of heart, whose pain and anguish are emotional and psychological, pain of the soul rather than the body. Give strength to those of us who are fighting the many dependencies and addictions of the modern world, and give us the strength to proceed in our recoveries. Help all of us as we are affected by COVID-19, HIV, AIDS, cancers, and other diseases, those of us who are ill, those of us who are not but may yet be, and those who are affected by the suffering of others. Bring healing to our families and friends and all we know. God, heal us of all our illnesses, physical, emotional, and spiritual, and let us find shalom. Remember us and all others who need your help, and let us say, Amen.
Amen.
On page 160 of B'chol Levavcha, 166, we'll be singing Hallel this evening in honor of this festival night, and we rise in body and spirit as we begin with the Psalms of the Hallel rubric. First up is Psalm 117 and 118.
Hodu l'Adonai ki tov ki le'olam chasto yamre vai 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 yamre vai 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 ki le'olam chasto yamre vai 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 yamre vai 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 ki le'olam chasto Yomarna, Yomarna, Yisrael, Ki le'olam chasto. Yamar vai 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 vai, yamar vai vai vai, Ki le'olam chasto. Yamar vai 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 vai, yamar vai vai vai, Ki le'olam chasto. Yomruna, Yomruna, v'taharon, ki le'olam chasto. Yamar vai 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 vai, yamar vai vai vai, ki le'olam chasto. Yamar vai 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 vai, yamar vai vai vai, ki le'olam chasto. Yomruna, Yomruna, Yisrael, ki le'olam chasto. Yamre vai 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 vai, yamre vai vai vai, ki le'olam chasto. Yamre vai 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 vai, yamre vai vai vai, ki le'olam chasto. Yamre vai 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 vai, yamre vai vai vai, ki le'olam chasto. Yamre vai 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 vai, yamre vai vai vai, ki le'olam chasto. פיתחו לי שערי צדק, אבובם אודיה. פיתחו לי שערי צדק,
page 138, we recite Kaddish Shalem.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה.
Amen.
ועלמא דברה קילותי והמליך מלכותי בחיי חונה ויומי חונה בחיי דכל בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו
Amen. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעלמיה יתברך.
יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן תתקבל צלת הון ובאות הון דכל ישראל קודם ובהון די ושמיה ואמרו אמן יהי שלום הרבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן עושה שלום ממרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו
As we take out our Torah scroll from the ark, we invite you to remain standing in body and spirit. And if you would like to follow along with us in the liturgy for these upcoming Hakafot, which mark Simchat Torah, we are in Sidur Kol HaNishama, the Reconstructionist movement Sidur, the brown cover, sometimes it's maroon. We are on page 655.
אתה הורית לדעת כי אדוני הוא האלוהים אין עוד מלבדו לעושה נפלאות גדולות לבדו כי לעולם חסדו ויהי בנסוע הארון ויאמר משה קומה אדוני ויפוצו אויביך וינוסו משנאיך מפניך כי מציון תצא תורה כי מציון תצא תורה ודבר אדוני מירושלים הרחמים היטיבה ברצונך את ציון תבנה חומות ירושלים תבנה חומות ירושלים כי בכל לבד בטחנו מלך ערם ונישא אדון עולמים
We started last year with a very special way of observing Simchat Torah in the middle of a pandemic. We didn't imagine that we would have to use quite those same muscles again this year, but here we are. So what we're going to do this year, if you remember last year, we invited the Soferet and Rabbi Linda Modskin, the scribe, to teach us how she actually writes a Sefer Torah. We wanted to find some way to honor the Torah because we couldn't dance with the Torah in big groups clustered together. You all remember last year. And she and we developed the Hakafot so that for each of the 7 Hakafot, she taught a different element to the aspect of what it takes to write a Sefer Torah. Do you remember that last year? It was fantastic, fascinating, and we all learned so much. And Rabbi Linda Modskin had come to CBST years ago when we were engaged in writing our own Sefer Torah to teach us then, and it was a wonderful experience to have her last year. When we realized that this year, again, we could not have crowds of people close together dancing around the Torah, we wanted to have a service that would celebrate the Torah in a way that would be fitting and meaningful. We're thrilled to have our Simchat Torah players. How many years have you guys been doing this with CBST? A lot of years. Many years. We love having you.
It's the best.
It's just the best having our Simchat Torah players, the CBST Simchat Torah players. Barbara Friedman, it's wonderful having you, and Sam and Joyce making so much beautiful music, because music is an essential part of Simchat Torah and of celebrating Torah. And wonderful to have Rabbi Rapport leading the service tonight. So we thought and we thought and we thought, what could we do tonight to really honor the Torah in a way that would be meaningful and profound and bring out the deepest of the connections between our community and our love for the Torah. And we realized that this year is the 40th year that our beloved CBST member, Jack Greenberg, has been teaching laning at CBST. 40 years in Judaism is a very significant number. It is the number of generations in the Chumash, in our biblical text, and it reflects Jack's deep commitment to teaching students Torah. We say in our tradition that if you teach somebody Torah, it's as if they are your own children. And if that's true, Jack has a lot of children. And so tonight, we are going to celebrate Jack and his generations of teaching laning, the ability to read from a Sefer Torah, but not only Torah trup, and we'll talk about that this evening, but all the different kinds of trup that he's taught through the course of these 40 years here at CBST. And I know so many of you at CBST are his students. In some families, the parents and the kids have all been taught by Jack. He's taught generations of adults at CBST, and now generations. When Jack started teaching laning at CBST, we had no children at CBST. When my oldest daughter became bat mitzvah in 1996, and she had the longest parsha in the entire Chumash for her parsha, I asked Jack to read the big chunk of it to represent CBST at that bat mitzvah. And I know, and his laning has always been a spiritual moment for me, and I'm spiritually moved by his connection to the laning itself. So by honoring Jack tonight, we're honoring the generations that it takes to teach Torah, and that Torah, static and kept to oneself, does not live and breathe in the way that Simchat Torah is celebrating. So for each of the 7 Hakafot, and a Hakafah is a processional, but of course, we can't do a processional with a lot of people clumped up together, close together, dancing around a Sefer Torah inside our small sanctuary. So we're gonna do the 7 Hakafot tonight, and we're gonna honor different categories of people at CBST. And we're gonna ask you, if you're in that category, to dance away in your house, on your chair, stand up and dance when the music plays. And then, at the end of the Hakafah, when we would bring the Torah back, we'll have different aspects of Jack's teaching, and we'll even have Jack teach some laning tonight for those of you who have not yet learned how to read a Sefer Torah or to lane in any way. Lane is the Yiddish word to read. So it's traditional to call the reading of the Torah in Ashkenazic Jewish communities laning. But somebody who reads from the Torah is known as a Bal Koreh, or the person who reads. And Jack Greenberg embodies so many values beyond the technical detail of laning. If you were to look at CBST's 40th anniversary book, and if you have it at home, and if you were to look in the index and you looked up Jack Greenberg, he has probably the longest index of any congregant for content related to him in this book. Jack has served in his years at CBST not only as a teacher of laning, and that has been extensive, and we celebrate that tonight. He was on the search committee, which hired me. He was the chair of the religious committee. He has served on any number of the search committees. He was an editor, one of the 5 of us who edited the CBST B'chol Levavcha, and it is Jack Greenberg is the reason there are no mistakes in any of the nikud, in any of the vowels in Hebrew and the spelling, although we caught a couple of typos, which was not Jack's fault, but the printer issues, which we've corrected in subsequent editions. And Jack's careful attention to both the detail and the gestalt is unparalleled. So tonight we're going to be celebrating Jack as a model of a teacher of Torah, and we're going to be celebrating his many students, and we're going to be celebrating the spiritual activity of reading our ancient texts, as modern, as an LGBTQ synagogue, learning the ability to read a text that's thousands of years old, texts, not texts, but texts that are thousands of years old, with a tradition that's probably 1,000 years old. We are able to dive deep into the history and longevity and arc of our people with this profound act. And Jack Greenberg makes it possible for so many of us to do it. And when he lanes, he models what it is to be a master laner. And so tonight, we're going to start with our first Hakafah, since Jack Greenberg is from Crown Heights. The first Hakafah will honor all those who grew up in Brooklyn, were born in Brooklyn, and or those who currently live in Brooklyn, and anybody who ever lived in Brooklyn. And especially we want to honor anybody who was born, grew up, lived, or lives in Crown Heights. So Hakafah number 1, and Sam will lead us in the chant on page 659.
Ana Adonai Hoshiana, Hoshiana. Ana Adonai Hatzlichana, Hatzlichana. Ana Adonai Aneinu B'yom Koreinu. Elohei Haruchot Hoshiana, Hoshiana. Bochen Levavot Hatzlichana, Hatzlichana. Goel Chazak Aneinu V'yom Ratzecha, Lavek Libeinu.
So for this section, I am going to interview Jack a bit about his background. So I'm going to invite Jack to join us. Jack, are you there on the Zoom?
I am here.
Hello, Jack. And is Ron with you?
Ron is in another room.
Wonderful. Well, we're thrilled. Ron is Jack's longtime partner who he met here at CBST, but we'll get to that story in a minute. Jack, so I want to start by asking you about your parents. Would you tell us your parents' names and how did they get to Crown Heights? Where are they from?
Well, my mother was born Rose Schwartz on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and my father was born in a shtetl in Poland. It was actually Austria-Hungary when he was born there, Gewodjic it was called, and he left home to make his way in the world, went to Germany where he had an aunt and uncle living, and tried to get into some business there in the 1930s. Not the ideal time to go to Germany. But he and his uncle's family were able to get out of there in 1938, fairly late, but they got out of there and they came to New York City to other relatives. And he had an aunt on the Lower East Side who had a dress shop, fancy dress shop. And my mother was a customer there. And so my aunt kind of made a shidduch, and that's how they got together. After the war, my father was drafted by the U.S. Army and served in Europe and stayed after the war in Munich to try to find members of his family in Gewodjic that might have survived the war. And mostly people were murdered there, but two sisters survived, and he found them in a DP camp and brought them to him in Munich. And meanwhile, my mother went over to Germany and got married. So I was born there. I was actually born as an army brat in Munich, Germany. Once my father was able to get his sister's visas to come to the United States, everyone moved back to New York, and they found an apartment in Brooklyn. So that's how we wound up in Crown Heights for about 17 years.
And tell us about the Jewish community in Crown Heights in which you grew up. Were both of your parents from? Describe what your family life was like in the Jewish community you were a part of in Crown Heights.
My father grew up in a frum household in Poland, but once he left there, he was no longer. And my mother also grew up in a religious household, but did not maintain that in her adult life. So together they were secular Jews who observed some traditions. And a cousin in our neighborhood suggested that they send me to a yeshiva in Crown Heights so that I would get some Jewish background. Well, that led to both of them becoming involved in the shul and in the school, and we became Orthodox when I was in third grade, and so I had an Orthodox growing up, and we were part of a modern Orthodox community in Crown Heights, not the Hasidic community, which was kind of coming in at that point. I was not part of that, but it was a multi-ethnic neighborhood and very vibrant. I really liked living there and enjoyed that community as part of my life at that time.
And do you remember going to synagogue regularly as a boy?
Yes, well, for sure, every Shabbat evening and morning and afternoon, and every Yom Tov. And I did go to yeshiva, so we had minyanim at yeshiva. So prayer and Torah study and Torah reading were very much a part of my life from when I was very young.
In the modern Orthodox world in Crown Heights, was the language of instruction in English?
It was, yes, some Hebrew and a lot of English, a mixture, a mixture. I had half a day of religious studies and half a day of secular studies, and yes, I'd say more English than Hebrew, but we learned Hebrew. We didn't learn conversational modern Hebrew, but we learned biblical Hebrew, prayer Hebrew, Talmudic Aramaic, and not so much modern Israeli Hebrew.
About
Um,
Yiddish, what about the role of Yiddish in your household or in your community?
Not for me, really. My parents were both fluent in it, but they didn't speak it at home, and I didn't need to know it in school, and so I never really learned it. I picked up odds and ends, but I never really learned it.
So
So
when,
oh,
so
I was
Jack,
going.
sorry.
Go ahead.
When do you remember what your first time laning?
Yes, I attended synagogue in the shul that was part of my yeshiva. That was only 3 blocks away. And on Shabbat morning, they had a junior congregation. A rabbi led a service for all of the pre bar mitzvah. I think there, it's hard to remember now, but I think that there were pre-bat mitzvah girls there as well, although in that community, bat mitzvah was not a big deal, unfortunately. Girls did really not have much of a coming of age ceremony. But I believe that both boys and girls attended that junior congregation. And so, as part of that, the rabbi had a session before services where he taught laning in kind of a rudimentary way. So I learned to lane that way through him when I was about 10 or 11 years old. And I wasn't sophisticated in what I learned. He taught melody and really didn't teach more than that. So I learned which symbols have which melodies, at least in some cases. And I learned to lane that way. So by the time of my bar mitzvah preparation, I already knew laning, and I just had to learn how to chant Haftarah.
So what was your bar mitzvah parsha?
Ishlach, which is 154 verses, and I laned the entire thing, and plus did the Haftarah and did a lot of the davening that morning in the synagogue. It was a large synagogue, so but that was what was expected. It was a rare bar mitzvah who didn't do all of that.
So your first laning was for your bar mitzvah? You didn't do a Megillah or something like that pre-bar mitzvah?
Well, I laned in junior congregation, but my first laning for a minyan that counted was that. Yes, was Vayishla.
And how about learning all of the Megillot and High Holiday Trup, all of those things? When did that happen?
So that came much later. So I had a close friend in college, in high school and college, who after college went to the Jewish Theological Seminary to study to be a rabbi. And I got a job out of college. I was a computer scientist. I got a job in New Jersey and moved to New Jersey. I've been in New Jersey ever since then. And but I was going to NYU for my master's. I would take the train in twice a week and go to classes after work. And sometimes I would drive in. Um, on Wednesday nights, I got together with my friend in his dorm at JTS and his rabbinic student friends, and it would be deli nights. And I would usually, once I got to know them, I'd pick up the deli on the way there, and we'd have a social evening. And my friend and one of his friends were passionate about studying cantillation and what we call Masoretic text, the transmission of the oral law that's involved in creating the Jewish Bible. And so I'd sit at their feet and absorb all of that, and I really loved it. All of the much more sophisticated than what I had learned when I was 10. And so through them, I learned the Haftarah and the Megillot and Esther and Eicha, and I really enriched my knowledge by having these social evenings with them. Um, and, uh, and and then I became a Baal Koreh after that. I was in a synagogue in Brooklyn for a number of years. I was a Baal Koreh there, and um, uh, so I laid at every opportunity from then on.
Jack, we have a question from chat, which is, did you ever think of becoming a rabbi?
I did think of it, but decided it wasn't for me. There are aspects of it that work. I think I would have been a rabbi teacher rather than a congregational rabbi. I think that might have worked for me, but um, I talked myself out of it. I thought there were parts of it that really didn't fit me.
Jack, to end this section for Hakafa 1, I'm wondering if you could tell everyone about the first night you came to CBST, which is told, there's a story that's told in our book that you described that to Rabbi Ayelet Cohen, but I'm wondering if you would tell us about that first time you came to CBST, and then we're going to end the first Hakafa.
Okay. I well, I had a lot of issues coming out. Being from an Orthodox background, it was when it dawned on me that I was gay. That was very hard for me, and I had years of difficulty with that, and with accepting it. And I won't go through all of that, but I finally did come to accept it. And so then I felt there's got to be something positive out there for me as a gay man. It can't just be, you know, dark rooms to find other men who are the same as I am. That's no life. So I happened to notice the famous ad in the Village Voice that talked about a gay synagogue with Friday night services, and well, I couldn't actually go to it because I was Orthodox, so I couldn't travel. I couldn't travel on Shabbat. So that waited a while. It waited about a year until I came to terms with my orthodoxy and decided that I really was no longer going to be an Orthodox Jew. I would have to find another way because I was tormented. I didn't want to be tormented over being gay, and Orthodoxy at that time did not leave me an option to be open and accept myself and remain Orthodox. At least I didn't know it. If it existed, perhaps some people will say that they found a way, but I didn't find it. So as soon as I decided that it was okay not to be Orthodox, I went on vacation to Israel, and I was not Orthodox in Israel for 2 weeks, and that was okay for me. And I decided if I could do that in Israel, then I could manage my life. And I came back, and the first three Friday that I had, I went into New York and went to CBST. And it was not easy to find that entrance up the ramp in Bethune Street, until I found that. And then you have to walk up this isolated ramp all by yourself into a room, and God knows what I was going to find there. And I walked into the what would you call that? The vestibule of our space on Bethune Street, and the same person always sat at the door every week greeting people. I don't know if I should mention the name, but he always sat at the door greeting people. And I walked in and I said, "This is my first time here." And he was very welcoming, excited. And he brought me in and started introducing me to people. And I felt like I had a home there from the very first night. I just felt that I belonged there. The service was beyond strange to me. Um, I'd never been to a service that had English in it. And it was very strange to be sitting there and being part of that. There were a lot of English readings at that time in the service. And however, I wandered around the social hour afterwards. I'm a quiet person. I don't meet people easily. I don't know if I met anyone the first week, but there was the next time I came back, there was a new person's um, like a rap group, people sitting around talking, and I was drawn into that, and I got to know other new people. And in a very short time, I felt like I was part of that community, and I started to get involved and started to do things there. And it's been a home for me ever since.
We at CBST are deeply grateful, and you have made this a home for so many others. So now we turn to Hakafah number 2, and we are going to honor and celebrate anyone who during the pandemic spent time studying anything Jewish, whether it's Hebrew language or reading or a topic or Psalms or music or Yiddish. Anybody who spent any time during this pandemic studying anything Jewish. So we will celebrate you, and when the music is on, we expect you to be dancing like crazy. Page 661.
דובר צדקות הושיענה הדול בלבושו הצליחנה ותיק וחסיד עננו ביום קוראנו איי 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 עננו עננו ביום קוראנו איי 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 עננו עננו ביום קוראנו איי
And for this, the second Hakafah, Jack will teach us.
Thank you, Rabbi. I thought I would start with explaining what it is exactly that we're talking about when we talk about trope symbols and cantillation. Where does that all come from? It was an ancient concept that Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, received the Torah directly from God on Mount Sinai. And Moses transmitted the Torah to the people Israel of that generation and passed it on to Joshua, who was the next leader. And Joshua transmitted it to the next generation, and so on, and so on, and so on. And there was a political body of Judaism that ensured that the Jewish Bible would get transmitted down through the generations. Originally just the Torah, but other writings were considered holy and got attached to the Torah. And at some point, the religious leadership decided to codify which of these writings should be part of the Jewish Bible and which shouldn't. So we wound up with the 5 books of the Torah, all the books of the prophets, and a lot of other writings that were also individual books. I say books, but they were all scrolls. They were all scrolls. Some of them two-sided scrolls like the Torah that we see, and some of them one-sided scrolls like a window shade. And those scrolls are called Megillot, and there are 5 of them that are just one-sided. Some books didn't make the cut, so the book of Maccabees was not. It was decided that would not be part of the Jewish Bible. It was a writing of the time, but not considered holy enough to be part of the Bible. And at some point, the order of the books was codified, and we wound up with our total Bible as we have it now, called the Tanakh, which is an acronym for Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, the Torah, the prophets, and the other writings. So the Tanakh was considered holy and had to be transmitted as it was from generation to generation, from scroll to scroll, forever. Originally, when there was a state of Israel, it was in a state of Judah, I should say. It was in the hands of the scribes, Sophrim, the ones who actually wrote these scrolls. They knew all the traditions of how the letters should be formed and what little tags should be put on some letters, how the lines were, how the spacing between words, there's occasional paragraph spacing, column width, all of that detail, plus all the detail of what goes into making and creating a Torah scroll, the materials and the instruments, which we heard about last Simchat Torah. So their function was to transcribe one scroll from another and to teach. All the scrolls have in them are letters, nothing else. The Hebrew letters, for those who are not so familiar, are consonants. It would be like writing an English sentence with only the consonants, no punctuation, and no vowels. And they would have to orally transmit how to read these words, how to make vowel sounds around the consonants, where do the verses end, and so on. And that was done as an oral tradition while there was a governing body of Israel. And what they transmitted orally is called Masorah or Masoret, which means oral tradition relating to the pronunciation and writing of the Jewish Bible, the Tanakh. After the destruction of the Second Temple in the year 70, there was a mass dispersal of Jews. Most of the Jews of Jerusalem were exiled, not all. Jews always remained in Israel, but Jews had already been living in various places in the world outside Israel, and so there was a mass exodus all over the Middle East and parts of Africa and parts of Europe, and no longer a central body to dictate what our Torah should look like and how it should be interpreted. and how the laws should be interpreted. So scholarly groups grew up in the major centers where enough Jews resided that there could be yeshivot study centers, and scholars would spend all their time debating laws and analyzing the scripture and analyzing the Talmud, which was the rabbinic law that came after the scripture. And if they had questions, they would write to other communities and communicate with other communities around the world. And at some time, they saw it couldn't all be oral. It had to be codified in some written way. Or you couldn't write inside a holy scroll. It was holy and couldn't have any additions to it other than what was there from early days. There are some letters in the Torah have dots over them, but that wasn't added later. That's an early tradition that scholars debate what is the meaning of those dots over these letters. So for them to actually interpret and record their interpretations, they had to create copies of all of these scriptures that were considered not holy, that weren't for public reading of a book, but that were considered study texts and could be marked up. So they created codices. Singular is codex. And what they are equivalent to our books today. They're parchment pages that are stitched together between wooden covers. And they wrote out all of these various books, the Torah and all the others. And then they could mark them up with symbols that we would call vowels, that would tell you how do we pronounce the words, or that we would call punctuation, periods and semicolons and commas, but they didn't do it that way. So, and each of these communities around the world created their own symbols. They all decided that's a good idea, and they created their own way, and then they debated with each other about what the best way was, and eventually, one of these groups won out. So we're talking about Masorah, and each of these groups are called Ba'alei Masorah, the masters or the studiers or the leaders of the oral tradition. And the particular group that won was the one in Tiberias, okay, which is in northern Israel around the Sea of Galilee. And their version of notation is what we have today. All the groups around the world agreed to go with that notation, and that's what we have. And that is in the printed Humashim, the texts that are printed versions of the Torah. What we see and what allows us to read those words, those verses, without somebody standing over us and teaching us, is the notation that the Tiberian Baalei Masorah created. So, Rabbi, could you show the first slide? All right. So, Masorah was involved with the traditions, the notations, the vocalization, and the interpretation that went into each of the books of our Tanakh. And as a result of that, the Baalei Masorah created vowels and dots and letters, accents, symbols that were accents, hyphens, pauses, musical tropes, and all kinds of footnotes about footnotes were very important because not every word is pronounced the way it looks. So a Masoretic footnote would say, don't read this word this way, read it that way. Don't assume this word is plural because it's missing this letter. It's really singular and it's pronounced this way, and so on and on and on and on. And also, this word in the Torah is not printed by mistake. It's correct the way it is, just to ensure that down the line there wouldn't be any changes. And they were very, very successful. We're talking about these people working from the year 400 or so. The earliest known person was in Palestine, and his name is, and I wrote it down. Dosa ben Elazar. He lived around the year 400, and fragments of materials that we have. He is the first person, the earliest person referred to. And went on until about 1200, 1300, when these communities started to die out. So, but by then there was a good body of notation left for the next generations. Um, so, one more slide, Rabbi. Yeah, so here's an example of the vowels. So the Hebrew vowels are in the middle columns. The X is any Hebrew letter, and the vowels are either under them or over them, or yes, under or over, and they have names. So the vowels actually have names. Many of you may know, and uh, this is the version of the Tiberian Ballet Masorah that we have in our Kumashim today. And below that, I show that letters can have dots in them. Dot is a dagesh. A dot and a hey is a mafik. Some letters can never have dots. That's called rafeh. And so all of this was created to tell people how to pronounce the words. Next, thank you. So here's an example of punctuation. So the sof pasuk is a colon after the last word in a verse. It's usually in our modern printing, it's printed as two diamonds. It was really just two dots on their parchment, but it's printed now as two diamonds, and it indicates the end of a verse. There's no music attached to it. It is just punctuation. A pasek underneath that is a vertical bar on a line. Maybe you've never paid attention to that. The next time, if any of you who attend services and look in a Chumash, you'll notice that occasionally there are these vertical bars on the same line as the letters, and you've just skipped over them, ignoring them. There are a very low level of pause. They're telling you there needs to be a slight pause here for one reason or another. I don't want to go into all that detail, but just to show you that they created a punctuation mark. And a meteg on the right side is a tiny little vertical line underneath a letter. If there's a vowel under there, it would go after the vowel to indicate a secondary accent. A secondary accent. There's another way of indicating where the accent, the primary accent is. And if there's more accents earlier in the word, on the first line there, I have the word Moshavotechem to the right. Yes. So that word is accented where the arrow is on the chem, but the other two vertical lines are meteg. There's a rhythm to that word. Moshavotechem. Right? The mo and the vo, those are secondary accents, and it's the meteg that tells us to do that. So that's as much as I want to say about that. And the next time I talk, we'll talk about the tropes and what they do and what the function of the music was.
Thank you so much, Jack. And I love that tonight we're actually learning and celebrating this amazing tradition, that you are the conduit, you are the vessel that's bringing it to so many of us at CBST. So Hakafa number 3, we're honoring everybody who's ever studied Hebrew at CBST and anyone who's had a bar mitzvah at CBST at any time. Page 663.
Zach v'yashar Hoshiana Chomel da'alim Hatzlichana Neinu biyom koreinu ay anenu biyom koreinu ay anenu biyom koreinu moed. Ay, 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 anay, 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 anay,
And for this third hakafa, Jack is going to teach a brief introduction to how to lane. And for those whose appetite is then inspired by this, there are many classes at CBST to continue. But Jack, will you give us the introduction to how to lane?
So could we have the first slide, please? The next one, yeah. Okay, so the Balei HaMasorah also created something that we call tropes. For those of you who read Hebrew and who have seen a Chumash and who read a Chumash, you could probably read a verse, whether or not you had learned to do this chanting. And you tuned out all of these little symbols that you didn't know what to do with. The words in the Chumash or in any Hebrew text um, have symbols on them that have various functions. And without knowing what they are, you can simply read and ignore them. So what they do is they explain to you how to read the verse. Tropes have three major functions. One is for melodic recitation. These scriptural books are read publicly. Back in ancient times, they were read to large groups of people in public squares. And it was much easier for people to listen and understand these readings if there was a melody attached to them than if they were just read as an address. Right? And the melody is also used for instruction, for teaching children. It's found that people listen more and remember more when there's music attached to what the instruction is. So the fact that these symbols are called tropes relates to their musical function. They're also called notes, even though each one is not a single note as we know it in Western notation, but rather a pattern, a group of notes together. And the Hebrew word nigina also means note or trope. The second function of the symbol is for accentuation, and sometimes they're referred to as accents. All but 5 of the symbols are above or below the first letter of the accented syllable of the word. So they tell you where to accent the word when you're reading it. It's very important for understanding. Sometimes the difference between a verb in past tense and in future tense is just where the accent is. And the trope is very helpful. So, of course, when we say the Shema in our prayers, and we say Vishinan Tam Levanecha, we don't say V'dibarta bam, because that's a future verb, and the trope that's on that word tells us to say V'dibarta bam. So I want to hear that from all of you from now on. No more V'dibarta bam. Thank you. So another function of the tropes is punctuation. And to that extent, a trope is called a ta'am or ta'amim. We know that ta'am means taste, but it also means meaning. And the tropes are a system of pauses and connectors. In technical terms, they're called disjunctives and conjunctives. The pauses have a hierarchy. Some pauses are like periods, some are like semicolons, some are like commas. They get weaker and weaker. Depend on the longer the verse, the more variety of tropes, to get this diversity of pause values. And the words in between the pauses are not pauses, they're conjunctives, they're just connectors, uh, and they all have musical value so that the entire verse can be read pleasantly according to its punctuation. It's important to know, if you know the tropes well, you know when to pause for how long, so that somebody who understands Hebrew can actually hear the meaning of the verse by listening. So let's go to the next page. Yes, so this is a table that's overwhelming. Um, the first column on the left shows all of the tropes that are pauses with an X as any Hebrew letter, and where they would go above or below or to the left of that letter. And the second column is the name of the trope. Uh, this, all of these tropes are used in 21 books of the 24 books of the Jewish Bible. There are 3 books that have a whole separate system of tropes. Those are called the poetic books of the Bible. They're Psalms, Tehillim, Proverbs, Mishlei, and Job, Eo. And they have a totally different set of tropes attached to them. Some of the symbols are the same. Some of the names of the symbols are the same, but they're different and their functions can be different. And I don't know any music for those books. So perhaps, I don't think traditionally anything has been passed down to us, but I believe that some people, modern people, are working on creating music out of those tropes. But the other 21 books all use the same system of tropes that you see here on these pages, and they're interrelated in the same ways. Only the melodies that are used for public readings might be different. So the right column shows the same thing, but with tropes that are the connectors, they're the conjunctives. So, and that's a total set. Now, the melodies that we have for these don't go back to the time of 70 CE. We don't know those early melodies. But somewhere in the Middle Ages along the way, melodies started to be created, early Middle Ages. And, and in the various communities that Jews dispersed to, they were affected by the melodies of the region. And so Jews of India, their tropes sound more like the music that they would find in their communities. And Jews of China, and Jews of Morocco, and Jews of Poland, and Jews of France, all different. And in some places, you didn't have to go too far to another town to find variations in tropes. But they all had a core of the same melody. People have done studies on these melodies, on the very basic part of melodies, find a lot of similarities between between the same tropes in very far reaching places that you wouldn't expect. Now, it doesn't sound so much when you're hearing them all together, but the basic core is the same. And so the tropes that I have learned are an Eastern European Polish tradition, and that is mostly what I teach. There are many other things that you can learn today, and the Reform movement, for example, has created or developed something that they named Avery Binder, that is similar but has variations, so that all Reform congregations around the world would adhere to that specific trope style. The conservative movement has done something similar to that. They call it Rozovsky. So there have been more modern developments on tropes that still adhere to ancient traditions. So let's go to the next page. So here's a verse that I just want to go into briefly to show you the punctuational and pause value of the tropes. So without knowing the tropes, we're just going to look at the first half of this verse. And not all of you can read Hebrew, I'm sure, but I will read. Hu Yitchatavo. The person will cleanse oneself with this is about cleansing with the ashes of a red heifer. So the person will be cleansed with the ashes of the red heifer by Yom HaShlishi on the third day, Uvayom HaShvi'i, and on the seventh day, Yitzhar, the person will be purified. So, and the second half of the verse is the same thing in the negative. So, I won't go into that, but how do we interpret this verse? Must the person be cleansed on both the third day and on the seventh day to be purified? Or must the person be cleansed on the third day and then, if they wait until the seventh day, they'll be purified? Or maybe the person needs to be cleansed with the ashes right away, and then on the third day and on the seventh day they're purified. So the tropes tell us, the placement of the tropes and their pause values tell us that the first reading that I said is correct. They must be cleansed on both the third day and on the seventh day, and if they do both of those cleansings, then they will be purified afterwards. So that's one example. Let's go to the next one. So here's a verse. Vayikach is the verb, the predicate of the sentence. Both the subject and the predicate. Vayikach means and he took, and he took. And then the whole rest of the verse is who's he? And he, it turns out, is many people, not just a he. So really, sometimes the Torah uses he in singular instead of plural when there's a singular a name or object immediately following the verb. So all we know is somebody took. And then we have all these names. Korach, the son of Yitzhar, the son of Kehat, the son of Levi, and Datan, and Aviram, the sons of Eliav, and On, the son of Pelet, the sons of Ruvain. Well, how do we make any head or tail of that? How many people are we talking about? Who's the son of who? You know, is Korach the son of Yitzhar? And then Ben Kahat is the son of Levi. And then maybe Aviram is the son of Eliav and On. How do we divide all of this up? So the tropes, just the way the tropes are placed, tell us that Korach was the son of Yitzhar, who was the son of Kehat, who was the son of Levi. And there's a big pause there. So Korach, that's just one person, 4 generations of one person, Korach, who came from the tribe of Levi. Then we have Datan and Aviram, that's 2 more people. Both of them are the sons of Eliab. Then we have On, that's now a 4th person. On is the son of Pelet. And all 3 of them, Datan, Aviram, and On, are from the tribe of Reuven. So it is only the tropes that tell us all of that. Otherwise, we might think On was from the tribe of Reuven, and we don't know where Datan and Aviram came from. The tropes tell us how to read this verse. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So here's an example. This is when I teach laning. This is the first page of trope patterns that I teach. These tropes are not placed randomly on words. They're placed for their pause effect, and they're placed under or above the letter of the accented syllable. So these are the names. Mercha, Tipcha, and Siluk are the names of the 3 tropes on this page that we're going to sing. And if we look on the left side of the page, where the 3 big X's are, to the right of the arrow, move the arrow to the right, please. Yeah, no, left, left, left. Yes, right there. So the 3, that's it. Okay. So the topmost symbol under the X is called Mercha. It's a curve that goes down to the left under the letter. And the next one on the next line, which is left of that, yes, that is called Tipcha, and it's a curve that goes to the right under the letter. And the third one is called siluk, and it's a vertical bar underneath the letter. And that siluk is a very strong pause. The tipcha is a not so strong pause, but stronger than others. And the mercha is a connector. It leads into both tipcha and into siluk. And it goes together in the 6 ways that I have it on the right side of the page. And the traditional way of learning the melody is to sing it according to the name of the trope. So that's what I'll do. I'll sing line 1, and the siluk is placed under the lamed because the accent of the word siluk under that lamed. So the siluk is placed on in the Hebrew under the lamed. Siluk, siluk. And that's how that will always sound in the trope that I teach. And the line below, line 2, we have a mercha leading into siluk. And this mercha is mercha siluk, mercha siluk. The line below, we have a tipka, the smaller pause, followed by siluk, the larger pause. Tipka, siluk, tipka, siluk. Then line 4, we have tipka followed by mercha siluk. Tipka, mercha siluk. Tipka, mercha siluk. Then on line 5, we have mercha leading into tipka. Mercha tipka siluk. Mercha tipka siluk. And on line 5, we have the complete pattern with mercha in front of both tipcha and, I'm sorry, line 6. Mercha in front of both tipcha and siluk. Mercha tipcha, mercha siluk, mercha tipcha, mercha siluk. So of course these words, mercha tipcha siluk, are not in the Jewish Bible. The words that contain the symbols will have to take the melody of these tropes and match the musical accent to the word accent. And sometimes that's involved by stretching a word, by stretching the trope, by chopping off a bit of melody. There's a technique for knowing how to do that depending where the accent is the word is and how many syllables it has. So let's go to the next page. So here's an example of a verse. So this is what's in the Torah. There are no vowels, there are no dots in the letters, there are no end of verse. It says, Vayedaber Adonai El Moshe Lemor. And those dots and things underneath the letters, that's just bad copying or from the line below. They don't exist, right? That's not there. Okay, Vayedaber Adonai El Moshe Lemor. And God spoke to Moses saying, and whatever God said would follow in the next verse. And there it is on the line below. The first line there is the paragraph where that appears. So there's no way to even know that that's the end of a verse if we didn't have the sof pasuk, that colon that tells us. Many people learned siluk as sof pasuk, but the sof pasuk is punctuation. It's just the colon between verses, and the siluk is a trope symbol that's placed to tell you where the accent of the word is. So remember, mercha tifcha, mercha siluk, vayedaber Adonai El Moshe Lemor. Now, if I were teaching Avery Bender, that would be Vayedaber Adonai El Moshe Lemor. So that's consistent within that system. And if this were in a haftarah, I have to think now. Vayedaber Adonai El Moshe Lemor. That's not right. Wait a minute. Vayedaber Adonai El Moshe Lemor. That's right. Okay, high holidays would be Vayedaber Adonai El Moshe Lemor. Esther would be Vayedaber Adonai El Moshe Lemor. The Megillot that are read on the pilgrimage festivals, as we read Kohelet this morning at services. Vayedaber Adonai El Moshe Lemor. And the last one that I know is Eicha Lamentations on Tisha B'Av. Vayedaber Adonai El Moshe Lemor. Okay, not easy for me to keep all that in my head at the same time. So a class with me would just be teaching one of those systems, and we would go week by week and learn all of the possible trope patterns that exist in the Torah or the Haftarah, whatever we will learn. So I hope that in the future, some of you will join a class that I teach.
Oh, Yasher Koach, Jack, that was just fantastic. Fantastic. And now we continue with Hakafa number 4. And we're honoring all of those who are ready to dance a little bit. And you could do it sitting in a chair with some motions of your arms or getting up. Let's see some energy there. And we do the chant on page 663 for Hakafa number 4.
מחשבות הושיענה כביר ונאור הצליחנה לובש דקות עננו ביום קוראנו איי 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 עננו ביום קוראנו איי 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 עננו ביום קוראנו
So Jack, for this hakafa, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about teaching at CBST. So Jack, tell us, what are the different systems that you've just described that you've actually taught at CBST? Which ones have you taught?
I have taught all of those that I mentioned, except maybe Esther. I don't know if I've ever taught a class in Megillat Esther, but maybe I did. But I know I definitely taught the others.
And tell us about how you and Ron met.
So I had just started going to CBST in January 1980, before any of you were born. And Ron was living in California at the time and came in with his family for his nephew's bar mitzvah in May of 1980. And he had begun going to our sibling congregation, Bet Chaim Chadashim in Los Angeles, a year earlier. And he wanted to see what a similar congregation in New York was like. So he came to services on the first day of Shavuot, which was in May that year. And we met each other there in this small, intimate service. It's easier to meet people at the time, maybe now too, in a smaller group than in a large sea of people. And we sat there, and he actually had the Aliyah for the Aseret HaDibrot, the Ten Commandments, that I was chanting. So we kind of met up there at the Ten Commandments on the Bima, and then we sat together. The whole group really sat together over lunch at Kiddush, and we really got to know each other. And I drove him home back to where he was staying in Brooklyn with his cousins, and we saw each other, I think, 4 or 5 more times in the week that he was in New York before he went back to California. And we just both knew that that was it. And I was originally going to move to Los Angeles area where he was living. And in the end, I had reasons where I felt I couldn't move away. I didn't want to do that. And he decided he would move back to New York where he grew up and be with me. And so that is now 41 years ago.
Jack, I have to tell you, I just looked up on page 231 of the 40th anniversary book of CBST, which lists a sampling of Lair House classes from 1998 to 2012, and you are listed there as teaching Megillat Esther cantillation. So question is solved. You're also listed here as teaching High Holiday cantillation, Haftarah cantillation, and Torah cantillation. So in those years, you did teach it, in fact. And we are going to, in the next Hakafa, celebrate all those whom you have actually taught. And I know you've taught adults and kids, although when you first were at CBST, we certainly didn't have any kids at CBST at that time. I have a question for you that I'm not sure you can actually answer, Jack, because it goes to something that speaks to your modesty and the humble person you are. One thing that moves me deeply, Jack, is how deeply you care about the precision of laning and how generous and loving you are for all of us who lane imperfectly. And I want you to, as my last question to you, how do you do that? How do you care so deeply and you're so precise and you're the most generous and non-judgmental and loving of teachers and of congregants? You're both deeply rooted in tradition, and you've also been very supportive and interested in creative new rituals to this day. Could you just reflect on that?
That's a challenge.
This one.
I can't be taken out of my traditional background, and so I have a very, very deep connection to tradition, and especially in this area, it just really reaches into my soul. It just grabs me in a certain way. At the same time, CBST accepted me as the man that I am, and I grew with it. Um, I found it to have traditions of its own, and then I was part of creating traditions, especially in the ritual and religious area, as CBST matured. Once you were part of CBST, I worked with you on that. It was very important to me that we recognize that we are something very special here, and that we're not just here to hold on to the ancient tradition, as important as that is to me. So I am a strange mixture. I can sit with my Siddur or my Machzor and say all the prayers that we don't say, and at the same time say all the additional prayers that we do say, and care very much that there's feminist language and modern interpretation. So I have evolved into an unusual mixture of things that are important to me. And I try not to be judgmental of other people in their efforts to learn and to create and to do. I think it's important for people to share, and if they're imperfect along the way, well, that will change, that will get better, and I accept that.
Thank you so much, Jack. That's so moving to hear you and to be with you tonight. So for Hakafah number 5, we are celebrating those who are students of Jack. If you have been a student of Jack in any context here at CBST in the course of these 40 years, if you'd like to send a message to Jack, write it in the chat, and offer him a blessing, or express your gratitude, or tell us in the chat what year or in which context you studied with him. And we turn to page 665 for Hakafah number 5.
Melech olamim Hoshiana, Hoshiana, Naor ve'adir hatzlichana, hatzlichana, Somech noflim aneinu biyom koreinu, ay ay ay, aneinu aneinu biyom koreinu, ay ay ay, aneinu aneinu biyom koreinu. Shaftem mayim b'sason mimayeh ha'yeshua, Shaftem mayim b'sason mimayeh ha'yeshua, mayim 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 mayim, hey mayim b'sason, mayim 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 mayim, hey mayim b'sason, hey 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 hey, mayim 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 b'sason, mayim 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 b'sason, Shaftem mayim b'sason mimayeh ha'yeshua, Shaftem mayim b'sason mimayeh ha'yeshua, mayim 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 mayim, hey mayim b'sason, mayim 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 mayim, hey mayim b'sason, hey 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 hey, mayim 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 b'sason, mayim 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 b'sason.
And now we will, for Hakafah, this is Hakafah number 5. Rabbi Rapport and I are going to read the names of all of Jack's students that we've been able to reconstruct over these, preparing for tonight. And if we've missed you, put your name in the chat. We'll add you to this very moving and impressive list. Whoops. So I'm going to start the reading, and then we'll go back and forth and share these names. And where we indicate somebody is a rabbi, and there are several on the list, they weren't rabbis when they were students of Jack's, and for some of them it was their first step into the world of laning altogether. Marnie Arlev, Benjamin Adler, Jonathan Adler, Rabbi Alan Lepayover, Hilbert Albert, Narda Alcorn, Rafaela Anchel, Laura Antonio, Renee Bajel, Michael Barr, Eula Barak, Yael Bat Chava, Aaron Benderson, Jacobo Bendahan, Adria Benjamin, Tara Benton, Ruth Berman, Leslie Bernstein, Mark Bieber, Ken Binder, Eileen Block, Mitchell Bloom, Sharon Bonder, Michael Broder, Martin Bruner, Salem Buchholz, Henry Carey, Shayna Call, Amy Chasanoff, Daniel Chesser-Turan, Rabbi Ian Chesser-Turan, Cindy Cogdill, Marcia Cohen, Phyllis Cooper, Rafaela Cortez, Robert Couturier, Noreen Dean Dresser, Leslie Deutsch, Liz Deutsch, Manny Deutsch Dornfeld, Mickey Deutsch Dornfeld, Diane Holzinger, Barbara Dolgen, Roy Doliner, Kevin Donahue, Liz Dornfeld.
Sherry Dratfield, David Eric, Janet Englund, Robert Eppenstein, Mike Ezon, Ora Ezrahi, Sandy Faddis, Susan Falk, Sabrina Farber, Ben Farber Shapiro, David Feinberg, Helene Feldman, Kim Fellensaal, Elizabeth Free, Joel Friedland, Sherry Feynman, Liz Galst, Sandra Gelman, Leslie Gevertz, Herb Givner, Louis Goldstein, Sharon Golub, Ellen Gould, Donna Gray, Lisa Green, Deborah Griboff, Ruth Gursky, Lori Hannon, Dean Harris, Helene Harris, Rebecca Harris, David Harrison, Kim Havison, Jeannie Heller, Neil Hoffman, Judith Hollander, Andy Engel, Harvey Israelton, Joanne Jacobson, Mark Janover, Marcy Kahn, Valerie Kamea, Martin Carlo, Lisa Kartzman, Erica Katz, Jeff Katz, Larry Kay, Marianne King.
Melanie Kohler-Levav, Karen Kropp, Daniel Kropp Sigmund, Eli Kropp Sigmund, Timothy Kennard, Mark Landis, Sybil Landau, Joni Lant, Rabbi Lori Gold, Jeremy Lawrence, Dina Leonard, Hope Levav, Harold Levine, Michael Levine, Ruth Lowenkron, Ari Ludvigsen, Harry Lutrin, Judy Maybach, Irene Meisel, Marsha Melnick, Nancy Mertzel, Susan Meyer, Sheila Michaels, Annette Miller, Marilyn Michon, Linda Moldovan, Rachel Monaco, Glenn Monis, Gail Nalvin, Jack Neiman, Karen Nothman, Mindy Novick, Julia Ostrov, Lisa Padilla, Janet Pavlov, Ricky Penn, Susan Pensack, Ginny Pierre Singletary, George Perloff, Julia Porper, Jane Posnick Bondarin, Yolanda Podosinski, Richard Radvin, Rabbi Rapport, Michael Reichbach, Lachelle Renee Boussy.
Eric Rosenbaum, Mia Rodstein, Elizabeth Sapreto, David Schwartz, Lou Siegel, Sin Senasib, Scott Shapiro, Jonathan Sheffer, David Schmidt-Chapman, Lori Siegel, Sarah Siegel, Stephanie Sigmund, Sarah Sloan, Linda Solomon, Scott Soloway, Devorah Stahl, Catherine Sull, Judith Tax, Barry Temkin, Hannah Temkin, Leah Tracton, Susan Unger, Cecilia Urban, Pierre Vallet, Mike Waldman, Ron Weiss, Jeffrey Weiss, Felix Wolf, Oscar Wolf, Barry Youngerman, Cantor Steve Zeidenberg, and Brian Zumhagen. 186 people that we could collect.
This is quite a legacy that you, Jack, have given to CBST and to all of these human beings, and we are so grateful as everyone is. So please, if you are one of his Jack students, write that in the chat if you know which year, or offer some words for Jack. But we acknowledge this Masorah that Jack acknowledged from the beginning, that the Torah is handed down generation to generation, and Jack Greenberg is a deep part of that tradition. And now for the 6th Hakafah, we celebrate the founding generation of CBST and new members who have arrived in the last year, as well as members who don't live in the tri-state area, those who are distance members. So please, if you are one of those, we expect to see you dancing during the music. We begin on page 665.
Ozer Dalim Hoshiana Hoshiana Podeh Umatzil Hatzlichana Hatzlichana לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, קדושתך נקדיש, לשבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, לעולם לעולם ועד, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, קדושתך נקדיש, לשבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, לעולם לעולם ועד.
Beautiful. And now for a final few words from Jack as we finish Hakafa number 6. Over to you, Jack.
Okay. It's been so important to me over the years to be involved in both the chanting and the teaching of the chanting. I get my deepest spiritual connections through this ancient text, through knowing when I chant something, it's based on music that's hundreds of years old, that's based on a system that's 1,000 or 1,500 years old, that's based on text that's more than 3,000 years old, and it just reaches into me. I feel the most spiritual when I'm connected, and when I'm standing at the bima reading Torah, the letters leap out at me, and I feel that. I look at the letter K in the Torah, in many traditions, the white space within the letter Pei is a letter Bet. And I feel like those Bets and Ks are reaching me, are calling out to me. Whenever there are dots over letters or small letters or large letters, I feel, I'm the one standing up there reading, and I'm feeling it. It's there for me. So I get such a deep spiritual connection out of all of that. And teaching it to other people has been very, very special. I'm most grateful to any of my students who have gone on to continue laning, to continue chanting, to have learned different systems, and especially those who have gone on to teach. A number of my students have become teachers, including my beloved Ron. And I owe a lot to you, Rabbi Kleinbaum. My teaching career of children is due to you. I was laid off from my work career after 9/11 and at loose ends and didn't know what to do with myself. And you suggested that I could teach children the lane, and you even got me a student. And from that, I wound up teaching so many children, both here at CBST and in many other places. And I really owe you that. And thank you so much. And all of the rabbis at CBST over the years who were my rabbis too. I love working with Rabbi Rapport. We have a great relationship. So I'm just so grateful to be part of this institution and to have been here for all this time. And I hope to continue to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jack. What an inspiration you are in form and content. The way you live your life, the gracious way you approach Judaism with such open-heartedness, and the way you bring in so many people. Really, you're an inspiration. So for Hakafa number 7, we'd like to honor all those of you who are setting a goal for yourself on your Jewish journey in 5782. In this year, this new year, Jewish year we are in, what's your goal for this year? Put it in the chat. Do you have a goal on your Jewish journey for 5782? Page 667.
קדוש ונורא, הושיענה, הושיענה, רחום וחנון, הצליחנה, הצליחנה, שומר הברית עננו ביום קוראנו, תומך תמימים, הושיענה, הושיענה, תקיף לעד, הצליחנה, הצליחנה, תמים במעשיו עננו ויום קוראנו. איי 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 עננו, עננו ביום קוראנו. איי 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 עננו, עננו ביום קוראנו. Ay, 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 ay,
And for our final Hakafah, Rabbi Rapport and I will offer a blessing to Jack Greenberg, and then we will begin the Torah service, now that we've prepared ourselves for the reading from the Torah.
It was Jack who taught me how to lay in high holiday Torah when I was already working at CBST, and I have to admit that it was scary to be in a place where I was supposed to be a Jewish expert and to step into a classroom admitting that I didn't know something very basic that so many CBST members year after year committed themselves to, so many of them taught by Jack. I was bolstered by the fact that in this class was also, at the time, cantorial intern Steve Zeidenberg, as well as some other wonderful people who are in the Zoom room tonight. And as has been repeated over and over again, Jack's gentle encouragement, his deep, deep knowledge of the material, but also of his students, to be able to listen so closely and say, no, you're actually half a step off there if you just change your pitch a little bit, is an extraordinary gift. And Jack, the blessing that I have for you is one that you wrote, which maybe is not so surprising because you wrote a lot of the Siddur. But When we recite Aleinu L'Shabeach at CBST, we use Jack Greenberg's words, his Hebrew, and the beautiful meaning that they transmit in their English. And this has always been a part of my history at CBST. This is the first congregation where I ever truly felt that Aleinu L'Shabeach was a prayer whose full heart I could put myself into. And it continues today. Jack was a lead member of our High Holiday laning team who tried to imagine last year and this year, what does it mean to share sacred text, to chant Torah when we're all in different rooms of the house across the entire world. So Jack, you wrote in Aleinu L'Shabeach, we say, Shebara otanu b'tzalmo v'nachvach banu et nishmat chayenu. You recognize that each of your students is created in the divine image, and you breathe into us a spirit and a love and a patience and a belief in a power not all of us knew we had. Shehemik otanu b'limud Torato v'kidshanu b'mitzvoteha. You deepen in us the study of Torah, and we are sanctified by its commandments through our more loving and intimate and close relationship with this text. Thanks to you.
So Jack might be one of the few people who remember that when I first came to CBST 30 years ago, I would lane. I gave that up quickly because there were so many better laners than me at CBST, and what a fantastic thing to have congregants be at the center. But I learned to lane from one of Jack's students, Alan Lepayover. So Jack, I guess that makes me your granddaughter of some kind, that I am the student of your student in that way. But I've been your student in so many ways. There is so much that, Jack, you and I did together. And in those early years, you stood for a transformation as well as this commitment to keeping to who CBST was in a way that was a very loving and supportive thing when I first came to CBST, and there was so much controversy around everything. You were always a voice of compassion and of wisdom. And so now, on behalf of the congregation, I offer you this final prayer in the Siddur that we worked on together for so long. The Tfilat HaDerech, the prayer for journey. As you continue on your journey of life with Ron Weiss ever at your side, and the two of you, a formidable team, and we hope and pray the time will come soon that you'll both be able to come into the sanctuary. Yehi ratzon milfanecha, may it be your will, God, of all those who came before us, to guide you and to direct your steps in peace. We pray that you will always come home in wholeness, joy, and peace. We pray that you, Jack, will be saved from all dangers and perils and from all afflictions that threaten our world. May you be granted insight and wisdom to overcome all obstacles. May you act in ways always that reflect your God's compassion and generous love. Listen to our voices today, because you, Holy One, are the one who hears our prayer. Blessed are you, Holy Ancient One of old. We pray that you will continue to guide Jack on his journey through the wilderness and into the land. And let us all say, Amen. Amen. And now that we've done 7 hakafot, we arrive at the Torah reading. And traditionally, as is done on Simchat Torah everywhere, we read the last parsha, the end of the book of Deuteronomy, and we will then immediately read the beginning of the book of Bereshit, of Genesis. And we mark this cycle of life, the cycle of the year, every year this way. So this last portion of Deuteronomy we read, and then we immediately go to begin again. If there is a theme of this season, as we talked about throughout Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, it's about beginning again and again and again. Every single reader of the Torah service tonight is a student or has been a student of Jack's from very early on, like Ron Weiss, who will be laning, but included in the laners tonight is someone who just studied with Jack in the spring of 2021. So our readers tonight will be all of Jack's students, and Jack himself will also lane. I think Saul Zalkin is the one exception who always reads the parsha that begins the book of Bereshit. Sam is going to do the brachot at the beginning of the reading section and at the end, as we've become accustomed to doing in this Zoom Torah services on Shabbat morning. And Rabbi Rappur will be organizing all of the laners who are going to be laning from their Zoom rooms, with the one exception. Ben Farber is going to be on video because he's traveling to start college, which is also very moving, but he very much wanted to be a part of this celebration of Jack, and most importantly, the celebration of Torah. So the Torah service begins with the bracha, and then the reading, starting the very end of the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy.
Baruchu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam. Asher ke'ervanu la'avodato ve'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Ata Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. V'savot habracha asher berach Moshe ish Elohim et bnei Yisrael lifnei moto vayomar Adonai misinai ba V'zarach miseir lamo Hofiha mehar paran Ve'ata meribavot kodesh Mimido eshtat lamo Omer banim Kol kedoshav V'yadecha V'hem tuku l'raglecha Yisrael midbarotecha Torah tziva lanu Moshe Morasha Kihilat Yaakov Vayehi Vishurun Melech V'hitasef Rashi Aham Yachad Shiftei Yisrael Yechi Reuven Ve'al Yamot Vihi Matav Bispar Shema Adonai Kol Yehudah Ve'elamot Li'enu Yadav Ra'lo Ve'ezer Mitzarav Tiyeh.
Thank you, Karen Kropp and Stephanie Sigmund, for reading the beginning of V'zot HaBracha reading. And now Ron Weiss will read chapter 33 of Deuteronomy, verses 8 through 12. Ron, you have to unmute.
I'll start again.
Great, thank you, Ron.
Okay, sorry.
That's
in high
okay.
holiday club. Okay. וללוי אמר, תומך ואורך לאיש חסידך, אשר ניסיתו במסע, תריבהו על מי מריבה, האומר לאביו ולאמו לא ראיתיו, ואת אחיו לא הכיר, ואת פניו לא ידע, כי שמרו אמרתך ובריתך ינצורו. יורו משפטיך ליעקב ותורתך לישראל, ישימו כתורה באפיך וחליל על מזבחך. ברך אדוני חילו ופועל ידיו תרצה, מחץ מותניים קמיו ומשנאיו מן יקומון. לבנימין אמר, ידיד אדוני ישכון לבטח עליו, כופף עליו כל היום, ובין כתפיו שכן.
Thank you, Ron. And our next reader will be Yael Bat Chava, who will be reading from chapter 33, verses 13 to 17. Yael, are you there, and can you unmute?
I'm here and I'm unmuted. וליוסף אמר, מבורכת אדוני ארצו, ממגד שמיים מטל, ומתהום רובצת תחת, וממגד תבואת שמש, וממגד גרש ירחים, ומראש הררי קדם, וממגד גבעות עולם, וממגד ארץ ובלועה, ורצון שוכני סנה, תבותה לראש יוסף, ולקודקוד נזיר אחיו, בכור שורו הדר לו, וקרני ראם קרניו, בהם עמים ינגח יחדיו אפסי ארץ, והם רבבות אפרים, והם אלפי מנשה.
Thank you, Yael. And our next reader is Ben Farber, verses 18 to 21.
Amen. V'li Zevulun amar, smach Zevulun b'tzeitecha, v'yisaschar bohalecha. Amim har yakra'u, sham yizbechu tzvichet tzedek, ki shefa yamim yinaku, usfune tambune chol. Ulgad amar Baruch marchiv Gad Kelavi shachein V'tarav zroa afkod kod Vayar reshit lo Kisham Chelkat mechol cake safun Vayete Rashi Am tzidkat Adonai asa, umishpatav v'him Yisrael.
Thank you so much, Ben, and we're sending you so much love as you start college. Our next reader, Tara Benton, was Jack's student this past spring of 2021, and Tara will be reading verses 22 to 26, chapter 33.
Vultan amar dan gorye izanek min habashan. Naphtali amar, Naphtali savaratzon, umale birkat Adonai, yamirarom yirasha. Ulasher amar, Baruch nibanim asher, yehi ritzui yecha, v'toveh bashamen raglo, barzel unchoshet min alecha, Uchyamecha dovecha, ein ka'el yeshurun, rochev shamayim bezrecha, ugavato shechakim. That's all I had.
So next, Sam and I will present a very special piyut, a liturgical poem. We will sing it tonight in honor of Jack Greenberg, our beloved Jack Greenberg. The words are attributed to cantor Jacques Judah Lyons, who was the cantor of the Spanish-Portuguese synagogue here in New York City from 1839 until 1877. The piyut is sung in honor of the Simchat Torah, which is what Jack will be tonight, the one that concludes the reading of the Torah before we begin again. So, please, Sam.
And the text reads, "Let joyous songs of praise ascend for God's Torah, which gives us light. The one who reads it to the end, we honor on this joyous night. So let us sing with souls uplift in hymns with happiness replete that God has granted us the gift, Torah, to read now complete." תנו שבחה וגם שירה ליוצר אורה ונותן תורה. תנו שבחה וגם שירה ליוצר אורה ונותן תורה. באיש הזה העדה בחרה להשלים את התורה. אנא נשמח בנפש טהורה. Shlimot
Gorgeous. Thank you. Now, Jack Greenberg will lane verses 27 of chapter 33 to chapter 34, verses to verse 12, ending the book of Deuteronomy. Jack Greenberg.
Me'ona Elohei kedem umitachat root olam vayigaresh mipanecha oyev vayomer hashmeid vayishkon Yisrael betach badad ein Yaakov el eretz dagan v'tirosh afshamav ya'afutal Ashrecha Yisrael mi chamocha amnosha b'Adonai magen ezrecha va'asher cheret ga'avatecha v'yikachashu oivecha lach ve'ata al bamatemo tidroch vaya'al Moshe me'avot Moav El Har Nevo Rosh HaPisgah Asher Al Pnei Yerecho Vayar'ehu Adonai Et Kol Haaretz Et HaGil'ad Ad Dan Ve'et Kol Naphtali Ve'et Eretz Ephraim Umnashe Ve'et Kol Eretz Yehuda Ad Hayam Ha'acharon Ve'et HaNegev Ve'et HaKikar Bik'at Yerecho Ir HaTamarim Ad Tzoar Vayomer Adonai Elav Zot ha'aretz asher nishbati la'Avraham liYitzchak u'Yaakov lemor lizar'acha etzemena heriticha ve'enecha v'shama lo ta'avor vayamot sham Moshe eved Adonai be'eretz Moav Al pi Adonai, vayikbor oto v'agai be'eretz Moav, mul beit Peor, v'lo yada ish et kivurato ad hayom hazeh, u'Moshe ben meya ve'esrim shana b'moto, Lo chahata eno v'lo naslecho vayivku v'nei Yisrael et Moshe barbot Moav shaloshim yom vayitzamu yemei v'chi evel Moshe b'Hoshua bin Nun malei ruach chochma Tisamach Moshe et yadav alav vayishmeru elav b'nei Yisrael vayasu kasher tziva Adonai et Moshe v'lo kam navi od b'Yisrael k'Moshe asher yida'o Adonai panim el panim Lechol ha'otot v'hamofetim asher shalacho Adonai la'asot be'eretz Mitzrayim leFaro u'chol avadav u'chol artzo u'chol hayad hachazaka u'chol hamorah hagadol asher Asa Moshe le'enei kol Yisrael.
Chazak v'nitchazek.
Chazak chazak v'nitchazek.
Yasher Koach. And with the ending of the reading of Devarim, we do this cycle of again and again returning. This music of returning and of reminding us of the cycle of the year, of the cycle of our lives. Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva. Return us so that we may return again. We sing these words of this beautiful composition by Ilana Arian, who's with us tonight. We return. We return.
We return.
We return.
We return.
We return. Return again. We return.
We return.
We return.
We return.
We return. Return again and again to truth. To truth. We return again to truth. We return again to truth. Hashivenu Adonai. Hashivenu Adonai. Elecha we return.
We return.
We return.
We return. We return. Return again.
We return.
We return.
We return.
We return. Return again
And again to you. To you. We return again to you. And now we return from the end of the book of Deuteronomy, the fifth book of the Chumash, Devarim. We now roll the scroll back to the beginning, and we return again to the beginning of Bereshit, and we invite Saul Zalkin to read the creation of the world. Saul, are you there? Are you unmuted, please?
Rabbi. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz v'haaretz hayata tohu vavohu v'choshech al pnei tehom v'ruach Elohim merachepet al pnei hamayim vayomer Elohim yihi or vayihi or vayar Elohim and ha'or kitov, vayabdel Elohim bein ha'or ubein ha'choshech, vayikra Elohim la'or yom, v'la'choshech kara layla.
Voker Yom Echad.
Vayere vayiboker yom echad, vayomer Elohim yihi rakia b'toch hamayim, v'hi mabdil ben mayim lamayim, vayas Elohim את הרקיע, ויבדל בין המים אשר מתחת לרקיע, ובין המים אשר מעל הרקיע, ויהי כן. ויקרא אלוהים לרקיע שמיים.
ויהי ערב ויהי בוקר יום שני.
ויהי ערב ויהי בוקר יום שני. ויאמר אלוהים, יקבעו המים מתחת השמיים אל מקום אחד, ותיראה היבשה, ויהי כן. ויקרא אלוהים ליבשה ארץ, ומקווה המים קרא ימים, וירא אלוהים כי טוב. ויאמר אלוהים, תדשא הארץ דשא, עשב מזריע זרע, עץ פרי, אוסף פרי למינו, אשר זרעו בו על הארץ, ויהי כן. ותוצא הארץ דשא עשב, מזריע זרע למיניהו, ועץ אוסף פרי, אשר זרע בו למיניהו, וירא אלוהים כי טוב.
ויהי ערב ויהי בוקר יום שלישי.
ויהי ערב ויהי בוקר יום שלישי. ויאמר אלוהים, יהי מאורות ברקיע השמיים, להבדיל בין היום ובין הלילה, והיו לאותות ומועדים ולימים ושנים. והיו למאורות ברקיע השמיים, להאיר על הארץ, ויהי כן. ויעש אלוהים את שני המאורות הגדולים, את המאור הגדול לממשלת היום, ואת המאור הקטון לממשלת הלילה, ואת הכוכבים, וייתן אותם אלוהים ברקיע השמיים להאיר על הארץ, ולמשול ביום ובלילה, ולהבדיל בין האור ובין החושך. וירא אלוהים כי טוב.
ויהי ערב ויהי בוקר יום רביעי.
ויהי ערב ויהי בוקר יום רביעי. ויאמר אלוהים, ישרצו המים שרץ נפש חיה, ועוף יעופף על הארץ על פני רקיע השמיים. ויברא אלוהים את התננים הגדולים, ואת כל נפש החיה הרומסת אשר שרצו המים למיניהם, ואת כל עוף כנף למיניהו, וירא אלוהים כי טוב. ויברך אותם אלוהים לאמור, פרו ורבו, ומילאו את המים בימים, והעוף ירד בארץ.
ויהי ערב ויהי בוקר יום חמישי.
ויהי ערב ויהי בוקר יום חמישי. ויאמר אלוהים, תוצא הארץ נפש חיה למינה, בהמה ברמס, וחייתו ארץ למינה. ויהי כן. ויעש אלוהים את חיית הארץ למינה, ואת הבהמה למינה, ואת כל רמס האדמה למיניהו. וירא אלוהים כי טוב. ויאמר אלוהים, נעשה אדם בצלמנו כדמותנו, וירדו בגד הים ובעוף השמיים, ובבהמה ובכל הארץ ובכל הרמס הרומס על הארץ. ויברא אלוהים את האדם בצלמו, בצלם אלוהים ברא אותו, זכר ונקבה ברא אותם, ויברך אותם אלוהים, ויאמר להם אלוהים, פרו ורבו, ומילאו את הארץ וכבשוה, ורדו בגד הים ובעוף השמיים, וכל חיה הרומסת על הארץ. ויאמר אלוהים, הנה נתתי לכם את כל עשב זורעי הזרע, אשר על פני כל הארץ, וכל העץ, אשר בו פרי עץ זורעי הזרע, לכם יהיה לחלק, ולכל חיית הארץ, ולכל עוף השמיים, ולכל רומס על הארץ, אשר בו נפש חיה, את כל ירד עשב לאכלה, ויהי כן. וירא אלוהים את כל אשר עשה, והנה טוב מאוד.
ויהי ערב ויבוקר יום השישי.
ויהי ערב ויבוקר יום השישי. ויחולו השמיים והארץ וכל צבאם. ויכל אלוהים ביום השביעי מלאכתו אשר עשה, וישבות ביום השביעי מכל מלאכתו אשר עשה. ויברך אלוהים את יום השביעי ויקדש אותו, כי בו שבת מכל מלאכתו אשר ברא אלוהים לעשות.
יש כוח.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. Yasher koach to all of the laners, to the students and to the teacher, and we now return the Torah to the ark.
כי לקח טוב נתתי לכם תורתי, אל תעזובו. עת חיים היא למחזיקים בה, ותומכיה מאושר
Page 140 in your CBST Sidur for CBST is Aleinu L'Shabeach.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שברא אותנו בצלמו, ונפח בנו את נשמת חיינו, שהעמיק אותנו בלימוד תורתו, וקידשנו במצוותיה. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ, ומושבי קרוב בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובי מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום בהשבות אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
We turn our thoughts to memory, and we honor the many, many teachers on whose shoulders we stand. If you are remembering somebody tonight, if you are in one of the traditional periods of Jewish mourning, Shiva Shloshim, or it's the 11 months leading up to the year of your loss of someone you love, if it's the Yortzeit, the anniversary of someone you care about, if there's someone who you called to mind at Yizkor services this morning, or if there's any name that you would like to share in our chat as we recite Mourner's Kaddish, we invite you to do so at this time. Please rise if it is your custom and join with me or answer me. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chaye dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uv'zman kariv v'imru.
Amen.
Yehei shmei Rabba mevarach leolam u'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalel v'yitalal shmei dekudsha brichu le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata tush bechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama Rabba min shamaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru. Amen. We close our service tonight with one more refrain of Eitz Chaim Hi L'Machazikim Ba V'Tomhecha Meushar. It is a tree of life for all of us who hold it fast, this Torah, and it brings to all who support it happiness and peace.
It is a tree of life to them who hold fast to it, and all of its supporters are happy. It is a tree of life to them that hold fast to it, and all of its supporters are happy. Shalom, 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 shalom. It is a tree of life to them that hold fast to it, and all of its supporters are happy. It is a tree of life to them that hold fast to it, and all of its supporters are happy. Shalom, 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 shalom. ושמחת בחגך והיית אך שמח, ושמחת בחגך והיית אך שמח. יננאי, נאי, 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 איי, איי, יננאי, 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 נאי, נאי, יננאי, נאי, 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 יננאי, נאי, יננאי, 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 נאי, נאי. ושמחת בחגך והיית אך שמח, ושמחת בחגך והיית אך שמח. יננאי, נאי, 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 איי, יננאי, 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 היי, יננאי, נאי, נאי, יננאי, 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 יננאי. ושמחת בחגך והיית אך שמח, ושמחת בחגך והיית אך שמח. יננאי, נאי, 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 יננאי, 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 היי, נאי, 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 איי, נאי, יננאי, 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 יננאי,
Chag Sameach, and thank you to Alana Arian, Yvonne Barenboim, Barbara Friedman, Joyce Rosenzweig, Sam Rosen, Rabbi Yael Rappur, and all of you, to Jack Greenberg and all of the laners, and tonight, Chag Sameach. Thank you, everybody. A sweet, sweet year full of returning again and again and again. Chag Sameach.